Hello, my dear friend. Hope you are doing great. We will talk about the quiet mind, how we move from chaos to clarity, and how calm thinking opens the door to real solutions. Now grab your coffee and let's dive in. It's funny how we spend all day wishing for a moment of peace, but then once the world finally goes quiet, our own minds become the loudest thing in the room. It's like being stuck in a room with a roommate who refuses to stop talking. Except that roommate is your own consciousness, constantly shuffling through old memories, tomorrow's worries, and random what-ifs just to keep itself occupied. We try to tell ourselves to just relax, but the harder we push for that stillness, the more our brain seems to resist, as if it's convinced that staying busy, even with useless thoughts, is the only way to keep us safe or prepared for a world that never truly stops moving. Even when we're exhausted, that default mode network in our head just kicks in automatically. It's like a background program that starts running the second we aren't focused on a specific task, dragging us into thoughts about the past or the future, whether we want to go there or not. It's a bit of a cruel irony that the more we crave silence and try to force our thoughts to stop, the more we end up focusing on the noise itself, making the mental chatter feel even louder and more persistent because we're fighting against a brain that was essentially evolved never to truly rest. It's one thing to be a deep thinker, but it's another thing entirely when your thoughts start to feel like a cage. When you're stuck in that loop we talked about, it's rarely productive. Instead, it starts to leak into your physical health and your personality. You find yourself stuck in two time zones, neither of which is the present. You're either constantly replaying past conversations, cringing at a tiny mistake you made days ago, or you're pre-playing disaster scenarios about the future. If you spend your evening rehearsing an argument that hasn't happened yet, or dissecting the tone of a text message for 3 hours, you're in a spiral. This is a huge one. You can't make a decision, even about small things like what to eat or which movie to watch, because you're terrified of making the wrong choice. You weigh the pros and cons until you're mentally exhausted, and by the time you actually decide, the opportunity has passed or you're too drained to enjoy it. Since your brain can't distinguish between a real threat and a stressful thought, your body stays tense. You might notice a constant clench in your jaw or tightness in your shoulders. That weird, heavy feeling in the pit of your stomach. The tired but wired sensation, where your body is physically collapsing from exhaustion, but your brain is running a marathon. Because you don't trust your own conclusions, you find yourself asking friends or family, "Are you sure it's okay?" Or, "What do you think they meant by that?" You're looking for someone else to quiet the noise in your head, because you can't seem to find the stop button yourself. You feel like if you just think about something long enough, you can prevent anything bad from happening. You over-prepare and over-analyze because you're trying to create a perfect outcome that doesn't exist. It's a way of trying to control the uncontrollable. You get so caught up in the tiny details, the trees, that you completely lose sight of the forest. You obsess over one sentence in an email and ignore the fact that the project was actually a huge success. The noise becomes so loud that the reality of the situation gets drowned out. One minute you're just solving a problem, and the next, you realize you've been staring at a wall for an hour, feeling like you've just run a mental marathon. The transition from productive thinking to a mental burden is often so quiet that we don't notice it until we're already exhausted. Normal thinking stays grounded in reality. It deals with the facts in front of you. It becomes a burden the moment it shifts into the realm of limitless what-ifs. Instead of thinking, "I need to finish this report," your brain starts thinking, "What if I finish it and they hate it? What if they hate it and I lose my job? What if I can't pay rent?" This is no longer thinking. It's a simulation of a crisis that hasn't happened. Your brain is burning real energy to fight imaginary battles. Productive thinking has a goal. You think, you decide, you act. It's a straight line. But when thinking becomes a burden, it becomes a circle. You lose the ability to reach a conclusion. You keep revisiting the same information over and over, hoping that if you look at it one more time, you'll find a hidden piece of certainty. This looping is what steals your energy because you're revving the engine without ever putting the car in gear. Thinking becomes a burden when it stops being a tool for logic and starts being an emotional echo chamber. When you're just thinking, you're analyzing. When you're overthinking, you're feeling. Each thought triggers a spark of anxiety, and that anxiety triggers another thought to try and soothe the anxiety. This creates a feedback loop that consumes an incredible amount of emotional fuel. By the end of the day, you aren't just mentally tired, you're emotionally depleted. Think of your brain like a smartphone. Natural thinking is like opening an app, using it, and then closing it. When thinking becomes a burden, it's like having 50 apps running in the background at once. Even when you're trying to have a conversation, eat a meal, or watch a movie, part of your brain is still processing that worry or that unfinished task. This constant background processing is why you feel tired, even if you haven't done anything all day. Your processor is overheating from all that hidden activity. Perhaps the heaviest part of the burden is that it steals your ability to be where you are. When your mind is busy trying to fix the past or secure the future, you aren't actually living your life. This creates a secondary burden, the guilt of being distracted. You feel bad that you weren't present for your family or your hobbies. And then you start thinking about how to fix that guilt, which, you guessed it, just adds more to the pile. It's like carrying an umbrella all day because you're afraid it might rain. The umbrella isn't heavy for the first 10 minutes, but after 10 hours your arm is shaking. The thought itself isn't the problem. It's how long we refuse to put it down. It's fascinating, and honestly a bit exhausting, how we can be sitting in a perfectly silent room, yet it feels like there's a crowded stadium shouting inside our heads. We often blame our current stress, but the hidden reasons for that constant mental noise usually go much deeper than just a busy to-do list. It's often about things we aren't even consciously aware of. Deep down, our brains are still wired for a world that was much more dangerous than the one we live in now. Even when things are going well, a part of your mind, the amygdala, is constantly whispering, "It's too quiet. What are we forgetting?" This noise is actually a misguided survival mechanism. Your brain generates noise to keep you alert, fearing that if you truly relax, you'll drop your guard and get attacked by a life problem you didn't see coming. Think of your mind like a kitchen. Every time something happens that you don't fully deal with, a snub from a friend, a moment of shame, a flash of anger, it's like leaving a dirty dish in the sink. If you keep pushing through your day without acknowledging how you feel, those emotions don't just vanish, they turn into static. The constant noise is often just your subconscious trying to get your attention to finally wash the dishes and process those pushed-aside feelings. We live in an era of infinite scrolling. Our brains are being fed constant, tiny hits of dopamine from notifications and short-form videos. This trains the brain to operate at an unnatural frequency. When the external stimulation stops, your brain doesn't know how to downshift. It tries to recreate that high-speed buzz by generating its own internal stimulation. Hence the frantic jumping thoughts that skip from one topic to the next. For many of us, silence is actually uncomfortable. Quiet requires us to sit with ourselves, and that can be scary. Sometimes the mental noise is a defense mechanism against loneliness or self-reflection. We keep our minds noisy because the alternative, true inner stillness, might force us to face truths or questions about our lives that we aren't ready to answer yet. The noise is a distraction from the silence. If you have a mind that is naturally good at finding patterns, it can be a double-edged sword. Your brain is a pattern-matching machine. It looks at a random comment from a boss and connects it to a news article you read, which connects to a childhood memory, which connects to a fear about the economy. This hyperconnectivity means one small thought can trigger a massive web of noise simply because your brain is too good at making associations. Most of the noise isn't just random data. It's a voice. Over the years, we internalize the voices of teachers, parents, and societal expectations. This internalized critic stays busy 24/7, measuring your current self against an ideal self. The noise is often the sound of constant self-negotiation, trying to prove to yourself that you're doing enough, being enough, or staying on the right track. It's like your brain is a radio that's stuck between stations, picking up a bit of everything but never quite hitting a clear signal. Understanding that this noise isn't brokenness, but rather a mix of old survival habits and modern overstimulation, can make it feel a little less overwhelming. It's one of the most maddening things about being human, having the exact same thought, the same worry, or the same what-if scenario play out in your head for the 1,000th time, even though you didn't get any closer to a solution the first 900 times. It's like a record player stuck in a scratch, playing the same 3 seconds of a song over and over. When we look at the mechanics of why our brain does this, it's not actually a glitch. It's a process that has gone off the rails. Deep down, your brain believes that thinking is the same thing as doing. When we face a problem we can't actually fix right now, like a past mistake or an uncertain future, the brain feels helpless. To regain a sense of control, it starts the loop. It thinks, if I keep this thought active, I'm at least working on it. We repeat the thought because stopping feels like giving up or leaving ourselves vulnerable. It's a way of babysitting the problem, so it doesn't catch us off guard. We often repeat a thought because our brain is convinced there is one tiny detail we've missed that will finally make everything make sense. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with a missing piece. You keep looking at the same 99 pieces, hoping that if you look at them from a different angle, the 100th piece will magically appear. We replay the conversation or the event because we are looking for a version of the story where we feel better or where the outcome changes. Think of your brain like a grassy field. The first time you have a stressful thought, you flatten a few blades of grass. The 1,000th time you have that thought, you've worn a deep, muddy trench into the ground. Your brain is built for efficiency, and once a thought pattern is well established, it becomes the easiest path for your mental energy to flow down. Sometimes we repeat thoughts simply because the pathway for that thought is so wide and deep that the brain falls into it automatically. Usually, thinking is supposed to lead to an action, and that action shuts off the brain's alarm. Example: you feel hungry. You think about food. You eat. The thought stops. With overthinking, the alarm, anxiety, is ringing. But there is no clear action to take. Because you can't do anything to change the past or predict the future, the alarm just keeps ringing, and your brain keeps generating the same thought in a desperate attempt to satisfy the alarm. Thoughts that have a strong emotional charge, especially shame, guilt, or fear, are sticky. They act like Velcro in the mind. A neutral thought, like, I need to buy milk, slides right through. But a thought like, I looked so stupid in that meeting, is covered in emotional barbs. It hooks into your self-esteem, and every time you try to push it away, it pulls back. We repeat it because we are trying to digest the painful emotion attached to it, but we're biting off more than we can chew. The hardest part to accept is that repetition is the opposite of resolution. If you haven't solved the problem in the first 10 loops, the 11th loop isn't going to have the answer either. At that point, your brain isn't thinking anymore, it's just obsessing. Up until now, we've talked about why the brain is so noisy and why it gets stuck in those exhausting loops. Usually, our first instinct is to run away, to scroll on our phones, drink another coffee, or literally tell our brains to shut up. But the more you push a thought away, the harder it pushes back. If you want to stop the war in your head, you have to change your relationship with the thoughts themselves. Instead of trying to delete them, you have to learn how to host them without letting them take over the house. The moment you have a stressful thought, you usually become that thought. You don't just think I'm a failure. You feel like a failure. To stop this, you need to create a tiny bit of space. Instead of saying I'm worried about work, try saying, I'm noticing a thought about work. It sounds like a small linguistic trick, but it's huge. It shifts you from being the victim of the thought to being the observer. You're standing on the sidewalk watching the thought traffic go by, rather than standing in the middle of the road, getting hit by it. Imagine your mind as a guest house and your thoughts are visitors. Some guests are lovely, and some are rude, loud, or annoying. If you spend all your energy trying to bar the door against the bad guests, you'll be exhausted and miserable. Dealing with thoughts means letting the bad guest sit in the living room. You don't have to serve them tea, and you don't have to believe what they're saying. You just acknowledge they are there. When you stop fighting their presence, they eventually get bored and leave on their own. Our brains are master storytellers, but they aren't always honest. When a recurring thought comes up, pull it into a mental courtroom. Ask yourself, is this a fact, or is this a story I'm telling myself? What is the actual evidence for this right now? Most of our mental noise is made of projections, guesses about the future, rather than evidence. When you demand facts, the emotional power of the thought usually starts to wither. If a thought is persistent, it's usually because it wants to be heard. Trying to ignore it is like ignoring a crying toddler. It just gets louder. Instead, try, Scheduled thinking time. Tell your brain, I see you're worried about the budget. I'm not going to think about this now. But at 5 p.m., I will give you 15 minutes of my full attention. When 5 p.m. comes, actually do it. Write the worries down. Often, by the time the appointment arrives, the urgency has vanished. Since overthinking is a head problem, the cure is often a body solution. When you feel the spiral starting, drop your attention out of your skull and into your feet, your hands, or your breath. Feel the weight of your body on the chair. Notice the temperature of the air. By engaging your senses, you force your brain to divert energy away from the thought loop and back into the nervous system. You aren't escaping. You're just relocating your focus to something real. Thoughts feel much more powerful when they are swirling around in the dark. When you put them on paper, they lose their magic. They become just words on a page. Seeing a scary thought written down often makes you realize how circular or illogical it actually is. It's like turning the lights on to realize that the monster in the corner was just a pile of laundry. The goal isn't to have a mind that is a blank slate. That's impossible for humans. The goal is to have a mind that is like a wide-open sky. The clouds, the thoughts, will always pass through, some dark and some light. But you are the sky, not the clouds. This brings us to what I like to call the quiet observer technique. If your mind is a raging river, most of the time you are right in the middle of it, gasping for air and getting swept away by the current. The goal of this technique isn't to stop the river from flowing. It's to climb out, sit on the bank, and just watch the water go by. It sounds simple, but for a brain that's used to being the main character in every drama, it takes a bit of a shift in perspective. Imagine your mind is a vast, empty cinema screen. Every thought that pops up, whether it's I forgot to buy bread or I'm not good enough, is just a movie clip playing on that screen. The key is to remember, you are the projector, not the movie. When a scary scene comes on, you don't run for your life. You stay in your seat because you know it's just light and shadow. By visualizing your thoughts as images passing across a screen, you strip away their power to hurt you. Usually, when we have a thought we don't like, we try to fix it, argue with it, or solve it. This is like trying to stop a wave by hitting it with your hands. You just create more splashes. Quiet observation means doing nothing. You let the thought exist. You say, oh, there's that anxiety thought again. Interesting. You don't try to change it. You don't try to make it positive. You just let it sit there. Paradoxically, when a thought has nothing to fight against, it loses its momentum and fades away much faster. Think of your thoughts like the weather. Sometimes it's sunny. Sometimes it's a thunderstorm. If you wake up and it's raining, you don't take it personally. You just acknowledge, it's raining today. Try to view your internal state the same way. Today there is a lot of low-pressure worry in the atmosphere of my mind. This helps you realize that thoughts are temporary environmental conditions, not a permanent part of who you are. The sky stays the same, no matter how bad the storm gets. When you're stuck in a loop, your thoughts feel like absolute truth. To break that spell, give the recurring themes a name. Maybe even a funny one. If you're worrying about money for the 10th time today, say, here comes the accountant again to tell me I'm going broke. Or if you're overanalyzing a social interaction, there goes the critic doing his usual routine. By naming the voice, you turn it into a character you're observing rather than a voice you have to obey. This is a bit more advanced, but it's incredibly peaceful. Start noticing the tiny, split-second silence between one thought and the next. Even in a noisy mind, there is a beginning and an end to every thought. By looking for the gap, you start to identify more with the silence than with the noise. You realize that you aren't the noise. You are the space in which the noise happens. While you are observing the mental storm, you need an anchor so you don't get pulled in. The best anchor is the physical sensation of your breath. Not thinking about breathing, but actually feeling the cool air in your nose or the rise of your belly. Whenever a thought tries to grab your hand and pull you into the river, you just feel your breath and say, I see you, thought. I'm staying right here on the bank. The quiet observer doesn't try to have a perfect or empty mind. They just realize that they are much bigger than their thoughts. It's like being a mountain. The clouds can circle the peak, the wind can howl, and the snow can fall, but the mountain itself doesn't move. It just stands there and watches it all happen. The what-if loop is probably the most sophisticated trap our brains ever set. It's a mental simulation that feels like productive planning, but it's actually just anxiety wearing a suit and tie. The problem with what if is that it is an infinite game. You can't win because the brain can always generate a new scenario to keep the cycle going. To break this chain, we have to stop trying to answer the questions and start changing the rules of the game. Shift from what if to what is. The what if loop lives entirely in a non-existent future. To break it, you have to aggressively pull yourself back to the current evidence. When your brain asks, "What if I lose my job?" answer it with a cold, hard fact about right now. What is true right now is that I am sitting on my couch, I am employed, and I am safe. By constantly countering a future guess with a present fact, you starve the loop of the uncertainty it needs to survive. Sometimes the loop continues because we are terrified of the vague shadow of a bad outcome. To break the power of a what if, follow it all the way to the basement. Brain. What if I fail the presentation? You. Okay, so what if I do? Brain. People will think I'm incompetent. You. And then what? Brain. I'll feel embarrassed and maybe have to try again. You. Can I survive feeling embarrassed? Yes. When you strip away the mystery and realize that even the worst case is something you can actually handle, the loop loses its scare factor. This is one of the most powerful mental pivots you can make. What if is based on fear and helplessness. Even if is based on resilience and agency, instead of, what if I get rejected? Asterisk. Say, even if I get rejected, I am still a worthy person and I will find another path. This simple switch moves you from a defensive position, waiting for a blow to fall, to an offensive one, knowing you can handle whatever lands. The what-if loop is a literal neural pathway firing over and over. Sometimes you can't think your way out of a thought. You have to shock your system out of it. When you realize you've been looping for more than a few minutes, change your physical environment. Move to a different room. Splash cold water on your face. Do 10 jumping jacks. This sends a signal to your nervous system that the simulation is over and brings your energy back into your physical body. Distinguish between worry and problem solving. Ask yourself, is there an action I can take in the next 5 minutes to change this outcome? Asterisk. If yes, do the action and the loop will stop because the alarm has been satisfied. If no, recognize that this is worry, not solving. Tell your brain, this is a no action zone. We are just spinning wheels. Once you label it as useless noise, it becomes easier to ignore. Our brains are naturally biased toward negative what-ifs for survival. If you're going to indulge in imaginary scenarios, you might as well play fair. Every time your brain gives you a negative what-if, you're required to come up with a positive one. What if I mess up the interview? Asterisk. Okay, but what if they actually love my personality and offer me more money than I expected? It feels silly at first, but it reminds your brain that the future is neutral. It hasn't happened yet, so the good is just as likely as the bad. Breaking the chain isn't about never having a what-if thought again. It's about realizing that you don't have to follow that thought down the rabbit hole. You can see the what-if invitation arrive in your inbox and simply choose not to click on it. We've spent this journey deconstructing the noise, understanding why the brain loops, how it traps us in what-ifs, and how to observe it from the riverbank. But the ultimate goal isn't just to understand the noise, it's to build a sanctuary within yourself that remains quiet, even when the world outside, or the clutter in your mind, is screaming. Creating internal silence doesn't mean you stop thinking. It means you develop a still point, a place inside you that doesn't vibrate when the wind blows. Think of a hurricane. The winds are at 200 miles per hour, debris is flying, and the noise is deafening. But in the very center, the eye, it is perfectly still, and the sky is blue. Finding inner peace is about realizing that you are the eye, not the storm. You don't try to stop the wind. You just move deeper into the center. Whenever life gets chaotic, visualize yourself stepping back into that eye. It's a mental space where you let the chaos happen around you without letting it get inside you. Silence isn't something you find. It's something you build. You can't expect your mind to be quiet in a crisis if you never practice silence in the calm. Create a non-negotiable window every day, even just 5 minutes, where you do absolutely nothing. No phone, no book, no goal. You just sit and let the dust settle. Think of it like a glass of muddy water. If you keep stirring it, thinking, acting, it stays cloudy. If you let it sit, the mud sinks to the bottom and the water becomes clear. Peace is what remains when you stop stirring. A huge part of mental peace is simply deciding what is none of your business. A lot of our mental noise comes from trying to solve things that aren't ours to solve. Other people's opinions, global events we can't change, or the maybe of next year. By practicing selective indifference, you lower the volume. You tell yourself, this is happening, but it doesn't require my commentary. When you stop giving your energy to every passing cloud, the sky naturally clears. In the middle of a busy workday or a loud family gathering, you can maintain silence by using a soft focus. Instead of narrowing your mind on a single stressor, broaden your awareness. Feel the air on your skin, hear the distant hum of traffic, feel the weight of your feet. By diluting your thoughts into your physical senses, the thoughts become less concentrated and less painful. You are participating in the world, but you are rooted in your own presence. The final step to mental peace is the most counterintuitive. Stop judging yourself for having a noisy mind. If you get angry because you're overthinking, you've just added a second layer of noise. Peace begins the moment you say, okay, my mind is busy today, and that's fine. When you stop fighting the noise, the friction that generates the heat disappears. Silence is the absence of resistance. If there is one thing I want you to take away from our conversation, it's this. Peace isn't a destination you reach. It's the background of who you already are. The noise of your thoughts is just a temporary broadcast. The silence is the space that allows the broadcast to happen. You don't have to create silence. You just have to stop identifying so closely with the noise that you forget the silence was always there, underneath it all. It's been quite a journey through the mechanics of the mind with you. I hope these shifts in perspective help you find that quiet center tonight.